for the award of a UK National Defence Medal to service veterans. There are no amendments to this item. It's on page 14 and 15 of your conference agenda. So I'm going to ask Janet King to stand by, and if I can call Colonel Terry Scriven to propose the motion. He was PPC for New Forest East and is Chair of Liberal Democrat Friends of the Armed Forces.
Conference, the motion before you today is not about the rights or wrongs of wars. It is about a failure of successive governments to recognise appropriately those who, as members of the armed forces, have kept and continue to keep this country and its interests safe and secure. When our servicemen and women take the oath or affirmation of allegiance to the sovereign, they are likely at any time to be called upon to make personal sacrifices in the service of the nation. Thousands and thousands of veterans believe their service they have given has been completely forgotten. There are 4 categories of medals available to our service personnel. First, medals for individual brave and meritorious service, such as the Victoria Cross. Second, medals of specific campaigns, such as Iraq and Afghanistan. And the remaining 2 categories cover recognition of service, medals for long service and good conduct, and medals that recognise service at specific times in Her Majesty's reign, such as the Silver and Golden Jubilees. The National Defence Medal is about recognition of service. In this climate of austerity, we cannot expect the taxpayer to underwrite the cost of the medal, so such a medal would be self-financing. I mention this so that the government or the Ministry of Defence do not use the lack of finance as yet another excuse not to recognise our veterans. Only the monarch may create a new medal, although the government are responsible for making the recommendations. For example, in 2005, the Australian government recommended all Australian Defence Force personnel and former regular and reserve personnel be recognised by the award of an Australian Defence Medal. Her Majesty approved the medal in March 2006. And in June last year, UK veterans submitted to Her Majesty, to the Prime Minister and to the Secretary of State for Defence a detailed justification for the award of the UK National Defence Medal. MOD made a collective response to the veterans. They turned down the medal. Freedom of Information Act request identified a total absence of paper or electronic records of discussions taking place within the MOD on the veteran's submission. However, it did identify a brief for the Veterans Minister by one of his staff on the line to take. The briefing paper, which I have seen, displayed shallow, shameful and shabby staff work and a lack of knowledge and total disrespect for our veterans. Subsequently, the Minister wrote, "There are no plans to further consider the institution of a National Defence Medal. The Ministry of Defence consider this matter closed." How can a National Defence Medal be totally dismissed and the matter declared closed when hundreds of members of Parliament were strongly advocating the award of the medal? A medal supported by regimental associations and other armed service groups, by both former and serving senior commanders, by public dignitaries and by veteran icons such as Dame Vera Lynn. Compare the former Labour government and MOD's position with a statement made recently by the New Zealand Defence Minister. He said, "The New Zealand government is to introduce a new defence medal for non-operational service, meeting its election campaign commitment to recognise service in the Defence Force by New Zealanders. The new medal will acknowledge the unique requirements of military service. These include commitment of service to the Crown, represented by taking the oath or affirmation of allegiance, being liable for operational service, and being subject to military discipline and lifestyle. This medal will also honour the commitment of reserve personnel, whose service to their country comes over and above their jobs and activities." What a difference. I want to spend a few moments highlighting some experience of our forgotten heroes. Between 1948 and 1960, over 2 million young men between the age of 18 and 21 were taken away from their homes and their normal way of life under an Act of Parliament that introduced national service. They were compelled to serve in the armed forces for up to 2 years. And without these young men, this country and its interests around the world would not have been protected. Many are now dead, and the remainder are in their 70s and 80s. The Cold War involved a formidable threat from the Soviet and Warsaw Pact forces. FOI requests identified hundreds and hundreds of service personnel died whilst on duty in Northwest Europe. And MOD refused to reveal how many servicemen and women were discharged through injury. We owe our freedom to the professionalism and dedication of all those men and women who served at the time. One of the most critical situations of the Cold War was the Berlin airlift. The Soviet Union placed a blockade around Berlin in 1948 and 49, and the RAF and other Allied air forces worked tirelessly to keep West Berlin alive, its citizens fed, watered and warmed during the siege. 39 of our service personnel died in this operation, and perhaps the most scandalous of the treatment of our service personnel in the Cold War was the nuclear weapon testing, when 28,000 members of the UK Armed Forces were used as guinea pigs in a series of nuclear tests conducted in Australia and the Pacific Ocean area. None had protective clothing and were subjected to high levels of radiation. Less than 3,000 of those veterans are still alive today, and 30% of those deceased died in their 50s of cancers. We are aware of the Northern Ireland campaign, but many have forgotten that for almost 20 years, the Republican extremists posed a specific threat to British service personnel and their families outside Northern Ireland. There was no normal way of life, no safe haven. 11 Royal Marine bandsmen killed and 20 injured at the School of Music in Deal. A coach crowded with soldiers and their families blown up on the M62. Many injured, 11 dead, and a complete family, a corporal, his wife, and their children aged 5 and 2, killed. And the Staff Sergeant blown up in Colchester and lost his legs. And a corporal and a 4-month-old baby shot and killed at a petrol station in Wildenrath. The list goes on and on and on. Conference, recognition of service is a symbolic part of addressing the broken military government. We have allowed the MOD and successive governments to deal with our veterans in a shabby way. It is time for action before it's too late for hundreds of thousands of our ageing former servicemen and women. How fitting if the National Defence Medals were presented in 2012, the Diamond Jubilee year of Her Majesty, whose reign will have covered 60 years of those who have been forgotten. Conference, send a message to our veterans, to our armed forces, and lead the nation. Call on the coalition government to recommend to Her Majesty the award of the National Defence Medal. I move this motion.